Welcome to the third quarter presentation, Water, the Next Major Asset Class, where industry solves the water problem. And now we've evolved from the second quarter, where we were talking about the merger of modular water systems with water on demand. And now we're going to start talking about where we go with acquisitions. Safe harbor statement, of course, about how things could differ materially from our forecasts. Very important slide here. This was the trillion-dollar future for water, where the world's first trillionaire will be in water. Well, that's David Lynch, who has a digital solution to water network management, which is very important. But we don't see this as one trillionaire. We want to make tens of thousands of millionaires. That's far more healthy. We're not interested in this pooling of the 0.0001% being super wealthy and everybody else serving them. We want to restore wealth to innovative investors, and that's where water is happening. Let me talk about this some more. Government infrastructure is failing, where we have not only what was predicted in 2016 by Lux Research, which already is a $100 billion a year gap. Now, in 2022 and 2023, we are seeing a trend towards deglobalization, where it's no longer viable to operate a factory in China, and many manufacturers are pulling back into the North American complex, from Canada to the United States to Mexico. For example, Tesla doing a great job operating in Texas, and they don't need to be in China. Now, if they're going to sell cars in China, of course, they'll have a factory there, but there's no need for them to build in China for the US market. They're building here, and that is going to happen more and more. Well, the question is, as there's going to be a boom in these state-of-the-art factories that are highly automated and very intelligently developed, where's their water treatment going to be? There won't be time to build central utilities, and so they will have to come with integrated water treatment. And this is a big reason why progressive water treatment and modular water systems saw tremendous increases last year in their business, nearly tripling. Why? Because more and more businesses are having to do their own water treatment as they are expanding into the North American market. All right, so here we have the funding. Even a five-fold increase in federal funding would leave a 22% shortfall of capital. So that tells us that many commercial users will have to do their own thing. They will no longer be able to send their wastewater to a central location. We have a problem here with households not being able to cover it. And by the way, the households are only 10% of the load. If they are being made to pay more and more, they're going to start defaulting on bills. Almost a third of all utilities doubt their ability to cover their cost of services. And at the far right here, we see more than half of all wastewater utilities have a problem with customer non-payment. Again, our solution is private water treatment to reduce the load so that the utilities are not stuck with this impossible problem. And again, municipalities are charging more and more for water and sewer service. You see on the right, what Americans pay for water and sewer service has increased much faster than inflation or the price of food. This was published by CBS News, but it quotes this consumer price index, and we see water and sewer rates skyrocketing. This gives a triple incentive to businesses to cut the cord by, number one, sending only treated water to the city, which the city loves. Number two, recycling their treated water, using it more than once for wash downs, for irrigation, whatever. And three, not having to have a sewage line at all, which means they can locate anywhere they want. And that's very useful in booming locations like North Texas, where from Dallas on north to the Oklahoma border, you have a boom situation where, again, sewage is not keeping up. What do? You can go off grid. So that is the solution that Modular Water Systems has been reporting on. They have a wonderful video where they show an installation that was done in Denison in northern Texas that we'll be showing you more and more as we go along. AquaTech's next phase. We're now privatizing a government monopoly. So here's where we go. Anytime you have a monopoly and you break it up, look what happened with AT&T. It created vast amounts of wealth, even to the point of giving us the internet today. If AT&T had remained a monopoly, we wouldn't have an internet. It just wouldn't happen because it was restraining trade. Okay, so now we have a fast-growing space here where mergers and acquisitions transactions which basically is the lifeblood of water activity. This is how the big water companies grow. Well, the number of completed M&A transactions was for utilities, which is the black, is very high between 2000 and 2020. But if you look to the right, the actual dollar value of utilities transaction was very low. And the bigger number was services and equipment deals growing faster. What I'm saying here is it's clear that private sector initiatives, not central government programs, have the momentum. And anybody who's smart in the water planning is going to recognize that's where it's at. So why would a business go private? Cost controls. If you have clearly defined cost indexing instead of unpredictable municipal rate increases, now a business can plan its future for 10, 15 years, 20 years even. It can recycle the water, which reduces their water expenses, but also saves water, places like California. Control over waste. Many breweries, for example, are having to truck their water from one county to the next because the local utility just refuses to take it. But this requires a two-part solution. And really going private, this makes the point here that by putting these treatment points at these remote points gives us at the bottom less burden equals a smaller central plant, therefore reducing the burden on the 150,000 plus water systems that we have in America. Well, the two-part solution, as I was saying, requires two parts. Number one is technology, scaling down from the large central systems to the on-site businesses with a management network. And it's a very important software cloud management that we're going to get into. Secondly is helping with capital so that businesses can get going with their water treatment. So you need to handle your water treatment. Capital is not a problem. Water on demand, therefore, is the answer with technology to fit on-site locations and eliminating capital expense. Here again, back to Lux Research, Future of Decentralized Water, back in 2016 said, look, we have a problem. We need modular construction. That's since 2018, we've had modular water systems. Assembly line methods, again, our division, modular water systems, is now part of Water on Demand. Plug and play on site. Literally, we have videos showing how these machines in their 40-foot containers with the full built-in controls, et cetera, were brought on a truck to a location, put onto a pad, plugged in, and 6 hours later, we're operating. Plug and play on site. And finally, remote management, which is a key. Remote monitoring and control are very, very critical. And finally, GreenBiz itself recognizes that upfront capital expenditures are holding back water technology startups, and that's very important. All right, so let's take a look at how Water on Demand does the total water management game. At the top right, we have investors who are putting money into Water on Demand, which then creates an operating contract with the customer. Going down to the left, we have modular water systems, building the systems and delivering it. Way bottom left, there's something new, planned manufacturing acquisitions. Dan Early has plans for acquiring more fabrication. We have plans also to build dedicated manufacturing with capital we plan to raise for the purpose south of the border, a lot of it south of the border, but also in the US. And then it goes over to a sensor array, and now you're managing the network. And we are in discussions with a company that is already profitably handling what's called middleware, the connection between a user and a cloud-based database. And in the middle, you have software that operates in the cloud. And they are also already doing that very well. And this is exactly what we need. We are in discussions, and this is disclosed very shortly. So the main steps are these. Number one, as we were saying, investing in a subsidiary. Number two, the contract. Number three, building the system with modular water systems. Number four, a cloud-connected network, bottom right there. And then five, managing and billing. And then finally, returning shares, profit shares to investors and partners. That is a recipe for in my opinion, a world-dominating system. And we are making the arrangements for having the operating capital to make all this happen, but also really getting the expertise. We're not going to grow expertise in-house. I came from high tech. I know what it takes to build a software company. It is royally painful. Instead, we can acquire and I don't want to get into too many details here beyond what is on this presentation, but basically we're talking about leveraging an existing expert business to have them create our network. And then this network, of course, can expand into multiple water on demand networks throughout the world. Super exciting. I couldn't tell you more about how excited I am. The new power play then is water on demand with modular water systems. And sure enough, we've paired technology on the left. Modular water systems, again, was created from scratch in 2018. We have invested well over $1 million over the years in developing this. We licensed a set of patents by Dan Early. His reputation has been growing fast, and many of his deals are called basis of design, which means that the customer has specified that modular water systems is the basis of design and nothing else. On the right, we created Water on Demand in 2021 to accelerate business adoption by replacing capital expense with operating expense, water as a service. And now we have the beginnings of a team that is pursuing pilot projects. Now, you say, well, where are the pilot projects? Here's very simple. You don't want to go after customers that have already fixed their capital problem because, it's like bringing ice to an Eskimo. Like, I'm good, right? So what we learned is we have to go early in the process. And with modular water systems now being part of Water on Demand, we can have Dan Early and his team propose a Water on Demand solution, water as a service, right at the beginning when they're first talking to the specifying engineer, when the thing is just in the design phase, long before it goes out to bid, long before they start talking about capital needs and leasing and this and that. They get to be, oh, you mean I can just sign a contract and I'll be on the meter and it'll be taken care of? Yes. So that's why we're really focused on modular water systems doing its job, because it will organically bring about the Water on Demand pilot projects. With this network, we have businesses that get water treated and managed on the meter, no capital required, long-term service contract. It includes a unique patented technology, prefabricated, durable, already developed. It's profitable. And remember, it almost tripled between 2021 and 2022. I'll show you that graph in a second. And now it's been transferred to Water on Demand in a deal that was very advantageous for Origin Clear. Now we are planning to add a network management acquisition, as I've been discussing, and acquisitions in the wastewater service and manufacturing business. Those are two major things that we'll be pursuing. However, it is not our plan to do local support, right? We're not ServPro. We're not here to do that stuff. There's plenty of local water companies that would be delighted to handle the local service contracts. And so when we're managing a long-term service contract with a customer, and the customer is in Seattle and we're in Texas, well, we'll just have a contract with a local maintainer in Seattle, and that is how it works. It's really very synergistic. I compared it to how Tesla did the brilliant move of creating a supercharger network. And now I have a brother who purchased a Mercedes electric vehicle. And he told me, I have Tesla envy. Why? Well, every day he goes from Clearwater to Sarasota, 1.5 hours there and back. He's like plugging into the local Whole Foods charger. He's like a gypsy electric car. And it's a beautiful Mercedes. It's a stunning car. But without the supercharger network, you're dead in the water. And so it's very important to have a network on the ground that assures that service. And that is part of our initiative. And you can call it our supercharger network. What about the competition? Well, I'm not going to get into this table because it's really well summarized by this quadrant. So at the top left, we have the conventional players that have some degree of managed services. Fluence, for example, does a good job with that. Evoqua also. American Water Works and Veolia are more in the centralized utilities business, that they operate a lot of city systems and so forth. So they tend to be, in that. But believe me, American Water spends $1 billion a year on acquisitions. So you better believe that they are moving into water as a service. Now, on the bottom right, we have some excellent competitors to us. 7Seas, which actually owns the water as a service trademark, focuses on very, very large installations doing desalination for islands, for example. But you can't invest in 7Seas. Why? Because it's operated by Morgan Stanley Infrastructure Partners, and they got their money. They're good. Cambrian again, is also a very good company. It's in the beverage industry. It does a lot of breweries. But guess what? It's venture capital funded. You can't put money into it. Water on Demand is a subsidiary of a public company. And since 2021, you've been able to invest in a water like an oil well. In other words, systems going out there, which we retain ownership of, and the investor can actually place a lien on the equipment to make sure that his or her royalty is paid. By royalty, I mean share of net profits. And so it creates a revenue stream. It's secured by an asset base, and it's long-term. It's very stable. And in addition, because it's early stage, we've done a lot of wonderful things to give people a share of both Origin Clear and Water on Demand as part of the package. Well worth reviewing with Ken Berenger, because it's been highly successful in raising money. And however, we're going to limit it to $20 million. We've raised about 7 million plus. We're not going beyond $20 million in this round. And after that, we have to take a fresh look at everything. So if you want to get into a residual asset, an investable asset, then you might want to consider the investment in Water on Demand that Origin Clear has been running for a couple of years now to support the new Water on Demand startup. Okay, now let's talk about modular water systems. Here's that patent that is the set of 5 patents is so important. And these basically have this structure that ensures a long-term solution to operating systems under, rain, snow, corrosion, whatever. This stuff keeps on running. And therefore, it means that you have a portable, integrated, transportable plug-and-play system that can be manufactured in series, standardized, just like Ford's assembly line, is more durable, and has proprietary configuration software. So there's that. Now, there was a recent valuation done of the patents by a company named GHB Intellect. That's what they do. And they valued the patents at nominal value, which means without taking inflation and other factors into account, between $26 and $53 million. The available market here, if you look at, for example, 2030, is $12 billion. Not a bad available market to go into. So that was a very powerful valuation we had done in February. Modular Water already delivers its systems to remote users. They already do it with breweries, with housing developments, with farms, mobile home parks, etc. The difference is it does it, people pay. So they're paying upfront, and Modular Water Systems delivers it. By uniting Modular Water Systems with Water on Demand, now we will have the ability to let these customers not have to pay upfront, and we'll do it, as I was saying, early on in the cycle when they are still looking at their solutions. But the important thing to remember here is we are already in that business and doing extremely well. I'm not going to get deeply into this, but basically what you're looking at is a plastic enclosure inside a 40-foot container. And so one inside the other. The plastic enclosure is fully waterproof and very high security and lots of important elements. But because you got a 40-foot container and the plastic waterproof system tanks are smaller, you have then an equipment room that enables you to operate things and have various system components and do your maintenance. So it works. You don't have to have a separate, for example, a separate maintenance house or whatever, right? It's all built in. It all gets trucked in, dropped in, and as you've seen in videos in the past, and we're going to keep showing you the videos, all the end user has to have is a pad with electrical and water connections. In comes the truck, drops it in, screw them in. An installation can be done in as little as 6 hours, up and running, treating the water, and it's coming out clear. Amazing. Now, pump stations is a business that really is not being, people don't realize how important it is, but there are literally millions of pump stations. Every time a water pipeline has to go up and then back down, you have a pump station. And the accepted difference is pump station is clean water, lift station is dirty water. There's a lot of debate about that. I'm not going to get into it. But the point is, you're doing it with both sewage and with clean water, and they leak. When they leak, you have two problems. Number one, if it's clean water, then you're losing revenue because this is water that's going into the ground. And if it's sewage, you're actually contaminating the groundwater. The solution here, which is called a VeraMod from Modular Water Systems, gives you a completely robust and durable pump station that is not going to leak, and it could last 75 to 100 years. That is taking the pump station networks by storm. We're winning national accounts because they're going, okay, you know what? No muss, no fuss. We drop these things in place and we don't have to worry again. Here in my condo, we have a lift station by the side of the street. And literally they have to keep, cars from parking and right where the lift station is because they might have to come in with a crane and pump it out because it breaks. The reliability factor of a VeraMod is far greater. And that is appreciated with these municipalities, but also these regular commercial accounts that just don't want to have a problem. Okay, now 2022 revenues, as forecast, were nearly triple 2021, about $1 million in 2021, and we achieved nearly triple. And that shows that we are highly scalable and in rapid adoption. We bring these together, and this is where it really starts to work. In fact, last month, we transferred Modular Water over. Now we have this combination of GM and GM Financial, right? So you have a captive financing organization supporting, and believe me, GM does a lot more deals because GM Financial is there. Like, hey, I'll give you 3 points less. You pay $300 less a month. Do a deal with us. People say, okay, right? Revenue and profitability growing. Again, we actually delivered 3 times the revenues in 2022 over 2021. And Water on Demand revenue in the future will add a tremendous amount more scale. Why? Because it's money. Money is a far more scalable thing than building equipment. And so you have scalability and profitability, and it's reflected in the graphs. Now, before I move on to the graphs, again, on the left, we have initial discussions with a profitable digital cloud software company that has long-term, large tech customers in place. The idea is to maintain their existing profitable business and to build our digital water network with that team. And as I say, we are in discussions with this company, and I can't say more than what you see right here. On the right, we're going to establish manufacturing centers. Dan Early says, listen, if you can get me more fabrication centers, I could get to 20 or 30 million from where I'm doing $1 million a quarter right now. You'll see in a second, that's how it's working out. Well, that's only 4 million. How about 10 times as much? Well, that requires manufacturing centers and then supporting the reshoring trend, again, bringing factories back to the North American complex with new factories with integrated wastewater treatment. That is a boom in the making. All right, let's take a look at charting the integrated whole. And we have Water on Demand with Modular Water Systems. Now, this has no effect from possible acquisitions. Why? Because they're still in the early stage and we just can't forecast it properly. But what we have done here by adding Modular Water, the light blue, is we've added current revenue. As you can see, it was quite small. We lived through hell, as Ken will testify. We lived through hell in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, things started to move. $1 million was booked. And these are revenues, which means it was not just booked, it was delivered, right? The milestones were delivered. 2022, we had a jump from $1 million to close to $3 million. And now in 2023, we're looking at $4 million, which is $1 million a quarter. And I'm not able to comment at this time on this, but we are very satisfied with the performance in 2023 against the forecast. So we believe this forecast is accurate. Now, as Modular Water Systems continues to grow, Water on Demand starts to generate revenue. And that's where you get your hockey stick for the combination of the two. Because remember, it's easier to work with money than to build things. This is why there's so many people in finance relative to people actually building apartment buildings and so forth. It's so much easier to do the financing. So that is the combination that we believe is highly synergistic. Let's take a look at the gross profits. And the gross profits, again, are tremendously enhanced by Modular Water being in business. They, again, literally it was $1,000 gross profit in 2019, actually negative 22,000 negative in 2020. Again, that was the whole COVID period. This is when Ken and I really started looking at what eventually became Water on Demand, because we were seeing that things weren't going nowhere at the time. Well, what we didn't count on was the bounce back factor, because in 2021, gross profits became $500,000, 2022, 800,000. And now we believe that gross profits will exceed $1 million in 2023. And again, in 2024 onward, you see gross profits from Water on Demand start to kick in. Here's where the investment shows up. This is on net profits. And so you have Modular Water noodling along here and operating profitably. We have no complaints about how they're operating. By the way, these reflect, it was difficult to generate these numbers because Modular Water and Progressive Water were one for a long time, but they reflect a rough estimate of the net profits. And as you can see, in 2023, we foresee that there's profitability with Modular Water, but Water on Demand requires investment. And so you see it being negative. But overall, we see 98,000, so roughly $100,000 positive in the combination. Now, then it becomes really intense in 2024, where Water on Demand is very negative. You see 724,000 negative, but Modular Water generating almost $1 million in net profits. These are all forecasts. This, remember, subject to safe harbor statement. But from there on out, you get this tremendous hockey stick. And this is the power of the model, because not only you have reasonable growth. In fact, on net profits, we didn't even show growth from 2025 to 2026 on Modular Water. Why? Because lots of investment in staffs and equipment and so forth, and lots of overhead being built. But that's okay, because Water on Demand starts to really cook. And so we end up in 2026 with an estimated, $7.5 million package from the two. Should it be much more? Absolutely. We're trying to be as conservative as possible and not to go crazy with ourselves. But this reflects a rational look at the business. Our CFO, Prasad Tare, was instrumental in modeling this, and he took a very sober approach to this forecasting. And so far, it's working out great. Okay, let's talk quickly about the operating plan. Number one, as I was saying, Modular Water Systems engineers will introduce Water on Demand early on to specifying engineers, and that's where they have that in, right? Number two, aggressive acquisitions of both digital. Remember, digital is hot, right? And manufacturing resources, with the goal of growing well beyond the forecasts you see on the previous pages. We intend to file more patents, because obviously there's been a lot of development since 2018 that we own, and we transferred that capability to Water on Demand. So it has the ability to file these, working with Dan Early, who is now part of Water on Demand. And finally, of course, we got to develop a strong team, the tech, high quality, to support this high quality nearshoring manufacturing that we're talking about, and continuous quality improvement. Lots of work to be done, but we have an excellent team. Technology plan is to establish network operating centers with continuous quality management and service level agreement enforcement. And that's where the prospective acquisition comes in. Develop that network of local support companies that we were talking about, creating a barrier to entry for competitors. And finally, we're going to create more lily pads, shall we say, of Water on Demand and other financial capitals that duplicate the same thing. We start replicating something that we've already built, and that starts to become a really interesting business. Now, on the capital side, we've been raising money from accredited investors, and that's this program that I was talking about that generates residuals, roughly $7.5 million raised so far. It is expensive money, so we're limiting it to $20 million. We're not going to be as generous in the future. Now's the time to get very good stock grants in both the parent company and Water on Demand. This has offered the 25% share, which is tremendously popular, very similar to how master limited partnerships work in the water like an oil well business. It's the only water as a service program that's open to accredited investors. And finally, we can expand this after this $20 million round, but it will be done differently. We also, in 2023, we opened a crowdfunding round, which is going to be paused as we move into something that, and I can't say when this might happen, but remember that in January, we announced a letter of intent for a merger with a special purpose acquisition corporation. And so this crowdfunding is very powerful for bringing in everyday investors, earning straight common stock in Water on Demand, and build a movement behind the company. But as I say, when and if we move into the S4 process, which is this merger that was originally discussed in the letter of intent, when and if it happens, we're not making any representations here, it will be paused. So that's why it's good. If people are interested, they should jump in and do it. But again, we can't get into how soon it might happen or if it'll happen at all. Now, of course, we intend to pursue institutional funding. And what's great about this is because we retain ownership of the assets, it's called hard money lending. And so that funding can be extremely cost efficient, just like basically like a house mortgage, right? They have a right to the house, therefore the percentages can be very, very low. We think a very similar situation can exist, but that's in the future at some time. Okay, let's jump into the team. Obviously, I've been in high tech and I've had my share of experiences running ships. And I love, of course, my love of water extends to skiing and sailing. And this is our plan to really revolutionize water. And I'm so proud of the team that's helping us make it happen. Here is Ken, who is really the key man who has been really developing the concept with me of this Water on Demand concept. He has a tremendous background in finance. He can talk mano a mano, man to man, man to woman with real concerned investors who want to try and figure things out. And he's going to give it straight. And that's, I think, what a lot of people appreciate with Ken. Daniel Early is the guru who has brought us into modular water systems. They live in the Roanoke, Virginia area. And he too has a family, and they're just wonderful people. And they are actually close to Virginia Tech. So that's kind of his area in terms of where he hangs out. But he's in Texas a lot with a lot of the business that we're doing there, as well as other parts of the country. Prasad Tare was brought in due to tremendous amount of experience in public accounting, et cetera. And he has done wonders to improve our governance and our timeliness of filing, and really super happy with how he has been revolutionizing the company. Finally, Colin Sherman joined us a couple of months ago. He has built literally billion-dollar systems for infrastructure-based projects, primarily in Australia, the city transport system. And to this day, they still use that electronic travel card that he helped introduce. And now his talents are being used to help Dan Early really organize a high-speed flow. And we're privileged to have him on board.